with the loan, not with the loan.
At her new place? At her new place?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they weren't gonna be able to close something about wherever she was going through was bought out by somebody else, and they wouldn't close. So
Oh.
she had to get together cash to pay for the house, and she said it was a mess. She said that she hopes they do a class action suit against whoever this.
Oh,
It
my.
wasn't like a normal bank.
Yikes. All right. Happy New Year. Glad you all made it out. We have a new agent with us today, Cheryl Rickman. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to meet Cheryl. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I just met her 20 minutes ago.
Well, I'm a former resident of Augusta County in Waynesboro for about 20 years. I moved back to Long Island a few years ago to be near family. I was a real estate agent there. I worked for the Corcoran Group. I came back 7 months ago, started working for Matchbox Realty in off-campus housing, and have decided to sidestep out of the student housing, which is a total zoo, and into sales, which I've always loved. I just haven't done house sales. I've done a lot of other sales,
Right.
but I do have a very long real estate, construction, renovation background for probably 30, 35 years, something like that, yeah. So I'm looking forward to being at Klein May.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we really haven't gotten together since the Christmas party, so big thank you to everybody who helped with that. Spencer and Sammy were a big part of that. Ryan from Appeal Production did a great job, I thought, editing that video. So that is always a lot of fun. Our Habitat project dates keep getting pushed back. It's kind of funny. They use this, Bruce is smiling because he's done renovations. They have a really cool system that I'm a part of that sends out a weekly email with the entire workflow for the whole house, start to finish. And it's just been funny to watch as the permitting is the first phase, and as that is not happening, every week the dates just get pushed and pushed and pushed. So now we are tentatively scheduled to have a crew out there at least one day between the 27th and the 30th of this month. They haven't told us yet which day it would be in that range or if it's going to be more than one day. But I will get you details as soon as they have something more firm. We've got a lot of folks who have jumped into GRI classes and broker classes, which is great. I think motivated by our new plan. Michael Guthrie sent me this a couple of days ago. And I'll email this around to everybody. But the Charlottesville Association, has put together all 8 classes that you need to take in person within the 2020 calendar year. So you could, in theory, knock the whole thing out between now and the end of the year and have to travel no further than Charlottesville. So if that is of interest to you, here's the whole schedule of what they're doing, what the dates and times are, and who the instructors are. So making it really easy. This is something that the last bullet point there that you've all probably seen come across your Facebook page or your news feed or something like that. But I think it's particularly important for people who write contracts all the time like us, and that is to make sure that in everything we do, we don't abbreviate the date like this. Because anybody could come after the fact and add an 18, 19, 17, 16, 15, whatever after that 20, and really booger up your contract. So in your personal stuff, when you're writing checks, if anybody still writes checks anymore, or anything that you're signing, be mindful of that for this calendar year to not leave that 20 dangling. So we are, as a company, we've always gone back and forth, company, synergy team, talking about a CRM. Some kind of system that would let you enter a new contact and then have that person follow through the whole process of being a prospect and then a client and then a past client and a referral source, and prompt you to be in touch with them as often as you've set things up to be. We've just never found a system that we thought would be well enough adopted that it would be worth the expense. But we have decided that we've got to do something. So we're kind of working on 2 tracks right now, and you guys can get prepared for that by starting to clean up your databases. So on one track, we're working on Paul Watley, who is a fairly new agent with us and helps out with education, has customized his Outlook to be a CRM. He's got everybody categorized. It prompts him to do stuff throughout the year. It's a very slick system. So he's working on embellishing that, making that something that we could adopt company-wide. He's working with Spencer on a third-party program that could integrate with it and make some stuff automatic. At the same time, we are setting up a demo for a very, 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 very robust CRM that we've decided against in the past because it was so expensive, but we're thinking that the value might be there if it's well enough adopted. So one way or the other, during 2020, we are going to implement a company-wide client relation system that'll hopefully integrate with 5 Street. And so your leads will just come in, and all you have to do is classify them, and everything would be automatic from there, depending on what kind of system you want to set up for keeping in touch with people. So the point of talking about this today is, say we implement that tomorrow. Say we say, all right, Keith decided we're buying this MoxieWorks program. Training starts in February. Have your databases ready. And you look at your current Outlook database contacts, and you have 2,713 people in there. And so now you're looking at, to really do this right, you're looking at going through each of those contacts and saying, number one, do I want to keep them? Are they duplicates? Do I have one person in there 4 times, once with a phone number, once with an email address, once with a web address, whatever. There are some pretty cheap pieces of software you can buy that combine all of that for you. But really going through and looking at each contact and saying, is this somebody I want to keep? And then if so, set up a very basic kind of classification system. If it's a current client, are they a buyer or a seller? If it's a past client, mark them as that. If it's somebody from any of the other circles in your life, church, a particular neighborhood, a particular school, whatever, set up a system where you just on a spreadsheet even, or you just have a column that you're labeling these people so that you can sort them out later when we get into a real system. It's kind of a daunting task. As we were talking about doing it, I was imagining myself going through my database to do that. And I think an easy way to do it might be, because we're at least a month away from this, might be to just do 1 letter of the alphabet every month. Hit all the A's today, and hit all the B's tomorrow, and hit all the C's the next day. And by the end of this month, you'll be done, and you'll be ready to import into whatever we end up using. If it's Outlook, you'll be ready to roll. If we end up buying a third-party thing, it'll be ready to import. Does that make sense? That's the hardest part of this thing. The hardest part of making a piece of software like that do something for you is the setup. So if we can go into it and get everybody set up properly, then it's just a matter of adding one person at a time as you do your work. So, we do standard forms updates January 1 and July 1. There shouldn't ever be a change to the forms other than those dates unless something really weird happens with the law and it's required. Ooh, I need to sign in. So this year, from the residential side, it's very, very mild, the changes that we have. Property management got hit by a lot. So on the Virginia Realtors webpage, there's always a page when updates come out in the standard form section that just has the updates. It's in this format, the name of the form, and then you can just click on it to expand and get a little summary of what's going on. If you want to see the actual form with the changes made, old stuff crossed out, new stuff put in, you can click that. So this is our standard contract. Really nothing impactful. Well, I guess nothing major, but this was a problem that we had talked about, I think, in our meetings here, and I know I've talked one-on-one with people. The former version of the contract didn't specifically say that if somebody didn't get their financing, they would get their deposit back. And so that has been made more clear. As long as they don't default, they're getting their deposit back. The only other thing that was added was at the very end of the contract, where we have that for information only section, they added a line for agent cell phone number. Oh, actually, this was what the problem was. It said deposit shall be refunded to the purchaser, which some folks had argued that even if the purchaser was in default, that meant they still got the money back. So this makes it clear that if they're not in default, they get the deposit back. And the last thing is right at the end here, agent cell phone. Again, this is for information purposes only. It's not part of the contract. It's below the signatures. But it's very handy information for everybody downstream who needs to process it. Some lenders and title companies get kind of pushy about saying it is part of the contract and they want it all filled in. The notice of termination made more clear because of the change in the law that says I can actually release a deposit without a signed release. If the situation is very clear and nobody's objecting. So they just made one little change here, saying that a release may be executed by both parties, not must be executed by both parties. So if you get stuck in a situation, I've had to do this 2 or 3 times since the law changed, where it's really, really clear somebody either didn't get their financing and they've got a clear letter from the bank, or they lost their job or whatever. They're not in default. They should get the deposit back. And the seller is just kind of going, no, you pissed me off and I'm not going to do it. In those kind of cases, we can give the money back. If somebody just disappears, which happened once, they just totally stopped corresponding, wouldn't respond to anything, any form of communication, but it was very clear that the other party was due the deposit back. We can give them the deposit without a signed release. If one party is objecting, then I'm not going to do it. We'll have to work it out. If they're objecting for a reasonable reason.
I have a question about
Sure.
What if you have a new construction and then the contractor wasn't finishing things and your buyers are getting upset and you're way past where you're supposed to have closed or had the certificate of occupancy, and the contractor is refusing to sign, can you still release without that signature there?
It would really depend on what's in the contract, because a lot of times builders have an addendum that gives them permission to be late, and it's never their fault, and weather can change anything, and so if they've gone, there's usually a definition where I'm going to finish within a year or something like that. So it would depend on where we are and what the actual contract said.
Okay.
But if there wasn't anything special in there, sure. Other question? Okay. This one was an interesting discussion in the Forms Committee. This is the possession by seller agreement, and it talked about, it just made more clear that the seller who is staying in the property after closing is going to get access. It wasn't really clear before, or a purchaser could have restricted the seller's access, even though they give them permission to be living in the house. So a line was just added that said seller will deliver to purchaser copies of keys access codes, alarm codes. So the purchaser, we said here the purchaser has access, but we didn't define that they're going to get full access. Apparently there have been problems in places where keyless entry is more common, or there may be a second keyless entry to the garage or something like that, and folks were arguing over access.
Now, that also, will that change this thing with Charlottesville not providing keys until after the
You know,
is recorded?
I still,
no. And that is, when that comes up and the Virginia Realtor lawyers are in the room, they all say, that's not right. That's not what our contract says. No, that's not, but that's not what our contract says. But it's, from what I understand, it's just the convention there and everybody behaves the same way. So if we have a deal with an agent from Charlottesville or that's closing over there, I think we need to address that issue.
it's also
Early.
Lexington too, so if y'all.
Really?
With Lexington, yeah,
That's just so weird to me when this contract is just crystal clear.
right.
But
That happened once with Lexington.
so the other thing that was added was somebody noticed this electronic signatures permission was left out of this form originally. I think that is. Yeah, this is no big deal. But if you want to, because we do send electronic documents, in the line that talks about the pamphlet that we're supposed to give to buyers, the URL, the link was also added. So if you send it to someone electronically, they can just click on it and it's been delivered. Yeah, it's kind of an ugly, long link, but this is kind of funny. On all of the amendment forms, we were missing a date field, apparently, so they fixed that right there. So it looks like all the other forms now. That's it. So kind of nice after the last few years of major changes with some of the forms and liability things and teams. This year was pretty quiet. I came across this and just thought it would be an interesting discussion because I know people have mixed feelings about it. So, has anybody heard of this fellow, Ryan Serhant? He's apparently a celebrity real estate guy on the USA Network, maybe. It wasn't HGTV, but he has a couple shows on one of the cable networks. Deals with high-end real estate, I think in New York, and he's now gotten into being a developer. And he made a big splash a few days ago. He's got a development going, and he made an offer through whatever their local MLS is for a $50,000 buyer's agent bonus to the first agent who brings him a contract in 2020 in this development. $50,000. So the article was kind of about, what do we think of buyer's agent bonuses? Are they effective? Do they help our industry or our image? Do they make people think we'll steer folks from one house to the other based on the compensation we receive rather than what's the best match for the buyer? So I just want to know what y'all think. When you're talking to sellers, sometimes sellers say, hey, let's do this. Sometimes agents suggest it as kind of a tiebreaker.
Are there not any restrictions?
There are not, other than it has to be disclosed. So if I'm the buyer's agent and you've got a listing and you're offering an extra $1,000 for whoever, if someone brings you a contract before the end of the month, and we do.
Like no cap, no restrictions?
No. I have to let my clients know that I'm earning that extra money. And often what happens is, unless the negotiation goes like that, if they stall out at any point, they're going to look to me and say, hey, how about that extra $1,000? We're $2,000 apart and you're getting extra money from that. So often it gets negotiated out. But yeah, there were, back in the crazy heyday, 12, 13 years ago, people were offering cars. We had a listing that had a Porsche in it, a high-end listing, and the car went with the house. $10,000 agent bonuses. all kinds of nutty stuff to differentiate. Now, it's such a seller's market, they don't really have to do it. This guy's trying to do it to get his new development jump started.
I've seen it done a lot in New York when I was working at corporate. I don't think it makes a difference really. I haven't, I was an administrative assistant, so I worked in an office with maybe 75 agents. And it was pretty common practice, whether it was rentals or sales. I don't think it really made a difference. I mean, in a buyer's market, I guess, dropping the price or, would be more effective from what I could see overall.
I agree. That's exactly what I would tell a seller.
I think it's nice when you can get that as the buyer's agent. However, I can see what she's saying too, that's another negotiation tool. So, but I think the whole premises of the reason why is like, hey, get your clients out here. Let's try. This is just an extra effort. Do you have any clients? Because some agents may just be kind of dead to knowing that that there may be someone
Same reason we have a realtor's open house, or say, hey, $50 gift card to anybody who shows us before the end of the month or whatever, in the hopes that you get somebody out there who maybe wouldn't have shown it, and it'll just happen to be the right buyer.
Right. Or they haven't thought of that buyer before, but when there's an extra little thing dangled in front of them, let me look and see if I've got anybody.
Right.
They may not have thought of that before. So
I did sell a house one time just because of a realtor open that I only went to because it was chili dogs.
really,
Chili dogs?
Jess's Chili Dogs from Harrisonburg. I had nobody who was looking for that type of house, I thought. I went just to get the free lunch, and in seeing the house, other than the fact that it was attached to another house, it was perfect for a young couple I was working with, and they bought it that day. And the only reason I was there was to get a chili dog.
See, I was just here earlier getting a chili dog.
Yeah, wasn't even searching for townhouses because they told me they didn't want one.
Right. I know.
So-
It's crazy when they say, "Oh, I'm not doing," and then you're like, "Well, you want this?"
Right,
Yeah.
right.
A lot of it's coincidence.
Right. So the downside to this, I think, is number one, like you said, the seller it may be more effective for the seller to drop the price by $50,000 rather than offer it to an agent. And I think it paints a picture for the public that we will steer our clients to the house that makes us the most money, not the house that's the best match. And that's always a problem for the business. But it'll be interesting. I hope it makes news when somebody sells it and we hear actually how the deal went down. Other thoughts? Anybody had sellers suggest that?
No, usually suggest that. They think we make enough money as it is. Majority of them think that.
Yeah, in this market, again, I wouldn't think so. But when sellers are sitting on the market for 5 and 6 months, they start suggesting things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So this is interesting. These are all Harrisonburg people. I sent Katie an email yesterday. I haven't heard back yet to see if Joe is tracking this for you guys. I think she is. I think we had asked Christy to do it, and for some reason it didn't get done. But when Katie audits all the .loop files, she keeps track of how many audit tasks, or if there were audit tasks or not, so that if there are people who have a whole bunch of problems, we can help them out. We also want to recognize the folks who did unusually well. So her end of the year report has everybody on it, and I've pulled out the people who have 25% or fewer, a rate of 25% or less of all the listing or contract files that they turn in that have any audit tasks at all. So that means Anne Marie had 24 transaction sides total, only 6 of them had audit tasks at all. Okay, and then as you work down the list, the 2 that to me are the most amazing, Kathy C. had 166 sides, and only 5% of those had any audit tasks at all. Suzanne Doughty had 24 sides and was completely perfect, which is amazing. So I hope, like I said, I hope we'll start tracking that for this year. You can kind of be thinking in your head of the ones you submit for review, and once you get back where you might fall in this mix. We have people that were 100%. Every single file they turned in had a problem of some kind. and then all the way up to Suzanne, who was perfect. But I think it's really interesting to track that, and I'm always amazed at the end of the year to see how much business Kathy does by herself.
She put Kathy C. parentheses favored.
Right. Yeah, and when we recognize them at the company meeting, her office manager is a lady named Faye, and she's one of the few people in the world that can keep up with Kathy. They've been together for years, and she is awesome. Awesome with the detail. Okay, so the awards luncheon for GAR is coming up at the end of this month. Everybody plan on going to that? To entice you, I put the menu up. It looks pretty darn good. It'll be at Stonewall Jackson, like it seems things regularly are. It's only $10, but you have to register through Eventbrite. So Betty sent everybody an email Monday early afternoon. If you don't remember getting that, check your junk folder. If it's in your junk folder, that means you don't open enough emails from Betty, and so Microsoft thinks you don't want to see them anymore. So start opening those because they're usually fairly important. Does anybody know of any other association stuff we need to be talking about?
We do have the Lisa Sturdivant, I think.
Economist.
The Economist. She is going to be talking February the 6th at the Frontier Culture Museum, and YPN is
Cool.
sponsoring.
Is that going to be multiple associations or
No,
GAR?
it's just GAR.
Okay.
It's GAR, and we're just providing light breakfast, coffee.
Do you know what her topic is?
The economy, looking forward, how
Big
how
picture
it's,
stuff.
How's 2020 going to turn out in the
Okay.
economy? So,
Okay, great,
yeah.
great, she's good. Anybody else? Any listings anybody wants to talk about?
I know. It's
No
March.
new stuff at
It's
all.
January, so-
Wow. Okay. Desperate buyers, price reductions, anything anybody needs to share, wants help with?
Miller Road, my land on Miller Road, he's ready to roll with it.
Okay.
Bring an offer. he said.
Remind us how much and price?
He is offering 20 acres. However, he has 45.
Okay.
I listed it before as 45. And does your client like it? Or,
Well, I haven't found out exactly what they're looking for yet.
okay,
My feeling is they'd like a farmette, but they'd like it in the $200,000 range instead of the $400,000 range.
Yeah,
Oh,
those
yeah,
folks.
well,
would.
then it's now listed 20 acres for 180. So,
And then the pictures show the farm buildings and the other parcel.
right, yeah,
Oh,
So
okay.
that's what they were looking for,
Gotcha.
but,
because
still
that was part of the.
texting
45.
back and forth with them, so.
Okay, alright. Bring me a buyer mark, come on.
Would that be something where you could adjust lot lines to get
We
them
can
the
adjust,
the buildings that they want?
There's not been a plat done, simply because he doesn't know what a buyer will
Okay.
want.
So yeah,
it's
have them
negotiable.
mark it up the way they'd like it to be and see what you get.
Yeah, he does not want to really, he doesn't want to divide up less than 10, however, he would really like 20 or more.
Okay. Anybody else?
Put in another plug for using this month to organize your contacts database. Make sure that everyone that you care about in your sphere is organized either in Outlook contacts or in a spreadsheet with name, phone number, and email address. And if you want to further categorize them into buyers, sellers, A tier, however you categorize your people, do that this month because the new stuff that we're talking about doing is really gonna blow your mind.
And if you want to do it in Outlook and you're not seeing how to set up those classifications, just text Spencer and set up a short appointment. He'll get you going. It's not hard. We use just this much of that system. It's really a crazy, crazy robust system. And this would be the first step. And it'll help. Like I said, it'll serve you well whether we stay with Outlook or go to something that's from another software developer. Okay. Have a great day. I'm gonna go get some salt for the front steps.
The front steps are fine, it's just the parking lot.
Yeah. Well, and the concrete right before the front
Oh,
steps.
okay.
And here comes Ryan, just jogging up from his Subaru, not phased a bit.
That's because
What's the name? I think he mentioned it the other day, right? They already knew what the name was going to be. Just can't
He did
remember.
call, I think he did say, but I don't know what.
Well, good. That's. I'm sure he's relieved.
She had difficulty.
Well, he was nervous about the surgery, just any kind of surgery in general.
Wonder why they scheduled
I think because she was having so many problems. They were just waiting until it was safe. Yes, I don't know how far along she is exactly. Or maybe her blood pressure's fine, but I don't know.
I don't know, but apparently it was ready.
Yeah.
Because she said this morning, and I assume morning, not 3 hours.
Right,
morning, so
right.
then they took her, and it's 11 o'clock, it's pretty quick.
Yeah. And that's a big kid. It's not like they were going to take it early. So, that's interesting.
I mean, I thought 8 pounds. Of course, I didn't have a very good measuring stick
Mhm.
the first time I measured me.
Spencer was a little over 10. I think he was 20 on his first birthday. All the boys in Jenny's family, all of her brothers, 20 pounds on their first birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what, Bailey's 4 before she was 20?
Right. Bailey was like 8 pounds and bald on her first birthday. She looked like an infant. She didn't have hair for about a year and a half. Just a little fuzz.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Spencer
My sister was like that.
had this huge, mat of curly hair that we loved and didn't cut until people started saying, "Oh, isn't she cute?" And so we said, "All right, we better cut her." Gee. And there were a lot of people who, it's funny both ways, a lot of people who told us they thought Spencer was a girl's name and Bailey was a boy's name.
Ah.
No, we can't let Lowe's do anything. Well, he even texted me 9 pounds and let me know. Oh, so he's made his mistake. Oh, so it was 6 pounds. That's a little bad. That's a little bad. Woo! That makes more sense. Why did he come out walking?
Yeah.